Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Clearwater's podcast, a podcast on clarity in an otherwise murky world. Along with my co-host Nick Petros, we have special guest Glenn Hirchfield, founder of ALJ Consulting in the United Kingdom. Glenn is going to share a little bit about creativity around this whole COVID space, something that has plagued business owners for more than 12 months.
I'll tell you actually, Kevin, an interesting thing you might want to think about, which is the creativity that businesses need to grapple with in order to get through COVID. So COVID has challenged our creativity like never before. So from people who are running call centers that had 1,000 people in the call center who now have 0 people who have canned their leases because they've realized they don't need to be in a building. People are working from home where they'd much rather be clocking into their computer as part of a virtual call center. In the M&A space, we've had to grapple with, forget about 2020, it's a write-off. We have to grapple with what will the business do in 2021 and write a kind of a pro forma view of their profitability. So you say, what will their outturn of profitability be at the end of 2020? And then find a buyer that's prepared to write a check based upon 2021. But that's happening as we speak. And then for people who have maybe been in a business which is, say, for example, the travel sector, Apollo put a whole load of capital into Expedia, for example. The fundamentals of that business have not changed in the last 12 months. It's just that cash has fallen through the floor, and cash, as we know, is king in businesses, right? But people are, my job, it's fun in parts, but the last 12 months, if we could put aside the tragedy of what's happened, actually, it's been the most interesting time to be in M&A because of needing to be creative around getting a deal put together. And then for those businesses that are impacted, helping them to diversify away from the most impactful areas. So they're often buying businesses to allow them to diversify. And the cash that's in the market has never been greater. And the value of businesses is still holding up despite COVID. What has changed is that the deal structures, so whereas a year ago people would have been paid maybe businesses worth $10 million, they'd have been paid 7.5 million upfront on day one, maybe 7. Now it's 4 or 5 million upfront and a hedge on the remaining 4 or 5, depending upon performance. So if you know your business is going to perform well, if you know, in inverted commas, if you're confident, then you have nothing to worry about. So the a podcast theme for sure would be around kind of COVID creativity, because it's testing everybody, no question. And that's not just in terms of how we're creative about getting enough exercise in the day so we don't go crazy at home, how we manage our home life, business life, social life, there's a whole load of stuff. But from a business perspective, creativity in COVID I think is a massively interesting topic for people. And I think you get a lot of people listening in, Kevin, I think, because everyone wants to know how other people are thinking about this. Yeah. And particularly if there's a positive spin on it.
Yeah. It almost sounds counterintuitive, though. You talked about Apollo putting money into Expedia. That seems counterintuitive to a lay mind like myself that says, travel companies would be the worst possible investment on the planet right now. So what's the thinking behind this injection of cash?
So it would be a question of the terms that they put the money in on. So because some firms like a travel business are going to be at rock bottom right now, the terms that they would get for that
really good
capital going in are unbelievably good, right?
Yep.
So for the future, they know in a year's time, everyone that's up in, let's just say, I don't know, let's just take Canada. Those people have been freezing their nads off for the last 12 months. They want to get down to Florida on holiday, right?
Yep.
Yeah. The minute that things open up, they're all coming. They're coming in a kind of a tsunami of activity. So if you're buying into travel and you're buying in cheap, but you know that it'll come back, not just to where it was, but higher still, you've not just got the movement back to the norm, but you're going to be way past that. That's my point around kind of COVID creativity, where lots of businesses have great fundamentals, but have been undermined by either a lack of cash, a lack of trading because of lockdown, lack of diversity in terms of, they're not diversified out of just one segment. And so they have to think, how do we get through this? Preserving cash is kind of a starting point. Working with your shareholders to make sure you have got enough runway to get you through. But then there's so much more that can be done around making sure when you come out the other side, you're in better shape than you were when you came in. The really smart guys are doing that incredibly well.
It is an incredibly interesting topic, and how do you see COVID affecting the M&A space right now? Has there been an uptick in those that want to exit? Has it been a kind of a downtick? I mean, what do you see the market? What's the driver there?
Liquidity is so people are looking at their cash, and I don't have enough cash to get by, and therefore I kind of have to sell. And when we get that type of opportunity, we'll sit with them and try and not make them quite so full of doom and gloom, to explain that there's plenty of opportunity to position the business in a much more positive way when things get back to normal. And to find, they automatically assume that they'll only be able to sell based upon what they did in 2020. And that couldn't be, well, a buyer would love to do a deal on that basis, of course. But if they get professional advice, then they'll be able to structure things in a far more positive way for them. So, there are trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of cash out there wanting to invest into companies. That's not going to change. Excuse me. And it's not career enhancing for the guys who have that capital not to deploy it. So it's there to deploy. They just need a story about businesses that is compelling, that explains what will be happening. And that kind of comes back to that point about being creative. But creative in a way, it has to be credible. It has to, when they do their diligence on it, it has to stack up and be something that they say, yeah, I see that. I see a route through to doing that. And things like, I've just got a term sheet arrived actually just as you were, so I was logging on for a business. It's a training business, and that business was 90% face-to-face training all across the UK and Europe. When COVID hit, they invested in an e-commerce, an e-platform, an e-learning platform. Mm-hmm. So their revenues went from 90% face-to-face. They've now gone to 95% e-learning. And the interesting thing about that is that the ARR, which is the annually recurring revenue for that e-learning thing, has a far better value, far better multiple than face-to-face. So out of adversity, their business is now worth double what it was pre-COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now they scale as well, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, you can scale a virtual learning.
And scalable. They had some pretty scary times, of course, trying to invest in the platform and getting that right and so on and so forth. But yeah, they come out of it the other side with, and we just had an offering for their business, which is a really good offer. And so, why would you be selling in this time? Well, the reason they're selling is because there's an opportunity to sell against the ARR number on a tech play rather than a face-to-face people play. At a time when it's going to be a while before people want to put all their staff in a boardroom with 50 staff and 3 trainers. Yeah, they'll say, yeah, just go online. Yeah.
I've got a podcasting service company that has a highly inflated value. If you have anybody that has too much cash, so we would love to exit at any moment. So, Nick, what's on your mind, Nick? I see the gears turning always.
No, I mean, I think the theme of COVID creativity is an interesting one. I think the shift to remote is a theme, like even outside of software. It's caused folks to discover a lot of things about how the business works. One interesting example, I think, like time tracking overlaid on productivity, has actually like revealed things that were happening in face-to-face environments that wouldn't have been seen if there wasn't a shift to remote. For example, you have a team of 10 people, they're not in your office with you anymore. How do you keep track of what they're up to? Use a time tracking or like screen viewing service. And we're seeing this with a couple of our partners and seeing it in our consulting company. But rather than use that data to like police your team and make sure people are on track, it's revealing that processes inside the business are extremely inefficient and easy to fix. If something's taking 10 hours, it should take 30 minutes. Immediate cost savings, increased productivity, and happier team because they're able to produce a lot more work and feel more accomplished at the end of the day. So that's what's turning in my head. I think COVID creativity is kind of pervasive because it has to be. Like you can't just do the same thing you were.
Yeah.
Everything's changed.
Yeah, it's definitely time for a reset. I think for a lot of businesses, there's a great opportunity. There's in Europe, I don't know about the US so much, but there's also government grants, loans, which are available to businesses. And a lot of businesses we've come across, they want to preserve their cash, but if they said, actually, you know what, we thought about this tech offering, we've been umming and ahhing, now's the time. Let's just do it with cheap cash. Let's deploy resources to it, because when things come back, do I need to be in, say, August, September this year? Do I need to be in London or New York or Chicago 3-4 times a week? Answer, no. I can, and this is actually what's accelerated our move. I mean, we're looking at Charlottesville perhaps being the base. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A year ago, people would have said, how can you do a deal for someone, a business that's in London? How can you sell it for them when you're 3,000 miles away? The answer is easy. Yeah. So that's just brought about, that, for example, it brought about a whole new set of possibilities for people. So actually for me, my business will start to acquire more and more US customers as well as my European customers. So I'll be able to almost double the size of the business in theory. I'm sure we will, to an extent that I'm happy with. You can't grow beyond a certain point, but that will be born out of, again, the fact that I don't need to, be in an office or meet a prospective client at their place, drive for, 4 or 5 hours, or fly for 4 or 5 hours to go meet them on the West Coast, for example. I don't need to do that anymore, which is good.
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating when things open up, like what will stick, and what will change. Because you were talking earlier about the tsunami of travelers, which I will very much be a part of. But I wonder if there's going to be like a tsunami of business events that also happen. You think about the constraint. There's a lot you can do face to face. There's a lot you can do over Zoom, but there's some things you can't do. Like there's some things you need to be in front of folks speaking to actually convey. And there are certain meetings and connections that are only made when someone is in a group that's kind of like validating what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we open up, because I think we'll both retain the efficiency we've gained from being virtual, and potentially be multiplied by having optional face-to-face access that brings back the things that we've lost. It'll be an exciting world.
I think that's good analysis. I agree with all of that, actually. Yeah, no, 100% for sure.
Reminds me of that idea of a third place. It's not your home, it's not your office, it's that coffee shop that, where things really happen. That third space, that third context, that, post COVID is going to be a third context. It's not going to be It's not going to be what it was before. It's not going to be completely virtual. There's going to be some form of blended, you know, context that it's going to be interesting to see. And I mean, Glenn, what's your take? I mean, as you kind of seen these execs trying to navigate COVID, I mean, do you see them um, do you see them navigating this well into this new space, into this third space? I mean, or is it more of it's kind of a case by case basis as you're meeting with these guys?
Look, I think it's a lot to do with a lot of these people, if they were glass half empty to start off with, they'll be struggling to see the upside. If they have
Good point.
Luddite tech tendencies and have never really understood tech and embraced it, the chances of them seeing a brave new world are probably quite remote. So I think it's quite binary. I think either you get it or you don't. And if you get it, or get the fact that you need to get some smart people around you to help you navigate through and kind of the COVID opportunity or COVID creativity. And of course, shareholders are also looking at their boards to say, in this new environment, do we have the right people in place? Because BAU is no longer the answer. Yeah. So if you were face to face, you no longer are. So how well have people and I think Nick makes a very good point that there will be a time where some businesses have to go back to that face-to-face thing, and how well prepared will people be to do that? I think back to, I'm old enough to have evolved through when I first started work, the pub was the place where everybody did business. Yeah. That evolved in the 90s to the coffee shop was where everyone did business. And here we find ourselves in the 2020s where home is where and I think that we are innately social beings, that people will, however much people tell us that it's better to be, how effective it is to be working from home, we'll all have that sense of, I'd quite like to be meeting people away from, have a separation between where I live and where I work. And that might not be 5 days a week, but that I suspect 2 or 3 days to break up there and interacting with people for their health, their mental health particularly. So I think that's an area that there'll be a lot of people, I suspect, earning some good money and helping people to not only balance, a lot of people will just say, well, everyone should now be at home. But I think quite quickly there'll be a sense of what's the healthiest balance for the person and the business, and those two things generally go hand in hand.
The healthiest balance for me is definitely here, because I can't stay out of the fridge when I'm at home.
Yeah.
This is more of a quarantine for me than it is for productivity purposes.
Yeah. Well, I'm now a source of great amusement with all of my private equity friends, because my 13-year-old comes in here regularly. And so yesterday I was on here, and one of these private equity guys said, so I thought that you probably kind of got through your school days. And I said, yeah, I have. He said, oh, it says at the bottom of the screen, your name is Luke, and you're in year 9, grade 9 of Reigate School. And I said, right. And another one of his was, he had a YouTube channel, and it had a particularly kind of crazy name. And again, I hadn't seen that's what had come up at the bottom of the screen. And they just said, so what is this Skills and Chills name that you've got? Yeah, that's not me. Yeah.
Oh, family.
Yeah, he's being humble. That Luke is a world-class athlete. There is no doubt he is a superb and a high character young man as well. So he's been a lot of fun to kind of watch his growth over the years. But
He'll be the first person going out into the baseball diamond of the football pitches in the US, kind of nodding and swaggering, like say, I've got this, and never having played the sport before.
You know what? It's not going to matter.
Interesting to behold.
It is not going to matter. It'll take him about 30 minutes to pick it up. So yeah,
Yeah.
there'll be no sweat at all.
Let's see.
Well, Glenn, I had a follow-up question I wanted to ask you as you're kind of speaking to our listeners here from the M&A space. What's one thing that a business owner really needs to take on board as they're preparing their exit, kind of we've kind of talked about the main theme of creativity around COVID. What are one or two key things that they really need to focus on as they're kind of preparing this exit that would really be helpful, maybe to a potential buyer?
Okay, so I would say three things. I would say ethics, honesty, and integrity, kind of all broadly the same thing. But the nature of selling a business is typically, think of it in real estate terms, that a real estate agent, will be convincing somebody that your log cabin is in fact a 6-bedroom palace that, with a little bit of work could be, and agents in the M&A space or firms have that habit of not wanting to talk about the bad stuff, just talking about the upside. Well, when a buyer puts in a Deloitte's or KPMG or EY to do the diligence, they're going to find the bad stuff, right? But bad in inverted commas. But there'll be, every business has its own Achilles heel. There'll be something. The sales team isn't particularly good, or maybe there was a bit of a creativity around the accounts one year for a very good reason. But so we would encourage people to, when they're thinking about selling, the first thing is try and do it really early. So start conversations early, and be ready to tell people what's really been going on in your business. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So that's kind of standard stuff. But the more honest you are, the more likely you are that you'll find a buyer that culturally is a great fit. Secondly, you'll find that when you get into the diligence stage, it will not be the most frightening experience of your life, whilst you wonder whether they do go to that file that sets out the fact that you lost a customer 3 weeks ago and hope that no one will ever find out. Yeah. So, and you'd be amazed at how often we are awash with cash, but we have so little time. Time is our most precious commodity. So from a buyer's perspective, if very early on they're getting a sense that they like the people, they trust the people, they love the fact that they're giving them a warts and all view of their business, why wouldn't they invest some time in getting to know the business better? So those would be they are obviously quite unusual things to think about, but those are things I think would be perhaps the best advice, because everything else is fairly formulaic in terms of what you do and you don't do around selling a business. But those things I think will keep people on the straight and narrow.
Remind us those three again.
Integrity, honesty, and ethics.
Right. I've got a very quick story about that. Early in our marriage, we sold a home, and as part of the sales process here in the States and maybe in the UK as well, you have to have like a disclosure statement that you literally are supposed to list everything that is wrong with the home. Well, my wife happened to fill that list out with our real estate agent, and when I looked at the list, I was appalled because it was like, there was a dead cockroach 3 years ago in the bathroom, I mean, at that level of detail. And I'm like going, and the realtor actually looked at us and said, "You guys don't act like you want to sell your house." And my wife looked at her and said, "Look, there's nothing that everything's going to be disclosed. So we have a completely and utterly clear conscience to when we sell the house." Well, the person that bought the house was a lady that had just gone through a divorce in a very difficult situation, and was really, really a kind of a low moment in life, and she needed somebody that was going to be honest and open with her.
Yeah.
Well, we actually moved overseas, and when we landed overseas, my new boss, who I had never met, asked me where we were from in the States. And I told him, and he said, "That's interesting. My sister lives in that town." And he said, "Well, what's her name?" And we started talking, and he said, he mentioned her name, and my wife just looked at him like, "You got to be kidding." His sister bought our house.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And he said, when I talked to her after the sale, he said the reason she bought the house was because she knew that person was honest, because they had disclosed an unbelievable list of things about the house. And I'm thinking, there's just 7.2 billion people in the planet, and we happen to sell a house to the sister of the person we would work for, just less than a year later. And so
Yeah.
I love the idea of just ethically disclosing things, in the process. And one point you made that really resonated with me was the fact that, it's like, you don't have to worry about that later in the process of things being found out. What's the old adage that says?
Because exactly, the flip to this is that the really smart private equity guys, and at Apollo there are a stack of them, the question they ask, which I love, is they'll say, so what would you do with unlimited capital? If I gave you $1 billion, what would you do in your business? And it's not a problem that many of us have ever had to worry about in our day-to-day jobs, right? So what that then starts to lead to is they say, well, I'd put another 50 people in my sales team, I'd get a new tech platform, we'd open up in the Asia Pacific region, blah, blah, blah. The challenges that people might think are challenges in their business, many people with capital will look at as just opportunities. So I've got a really poor sales team, or they're just not delivering. Right, well, let's invest in that team. My online platform just doesn't work. I spend $1 million and it's just hopeless. Well, let's reinvest and get it to where it needs to be, and we can then see a big uptick in sales. Cash can do amazing things in a business if they know where to deploy it. And that's kind of part and parcel of that honesty piece around explaining to people not just where there are problems, but where there are big opportunities for people. And that's again kind of just part of that issue around honesty, integrity, and ethics.
Well, Nick, why don't you just close us out today with, I know you always have some thoughts racing around in that, that brain of yours and that heart of yours, but close us out with your kind of your final thoughts as we wrapped up in this great conversation with Glenn.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is really interesting, particularly this part about being honest pre-discovery. So the things that are going to be found out are transparently shared beforehand. I think another piece of that, which I'm not sure how it fits into the diligence side of things, but another piece of that is being open to the fact that you might not know everything that is happening under the hood, and being open to discovering more. Because I think whether you're selling or not, learning something new, which this COVID ecosystem has forced all of us to do, can be a really good thing, or reveal something that can turn into a nice multiple for you down the line.
Yeah, spot on. I'm into that.
Cool.
Well, guys, it's always a pleasure for me to be able to sit in conversations like this. And with our Clear Waters podcast, we don't just have one expert on the panel. We always have two, because of my co-host Nick Petros. And guys, I just really appreciate your time and just sharing with us during Clear Waters, and just really providing clarity in an otherwise murky world. Guys, have a great day.
Thank you. Good to talk with you guys.